You are listening to Bridging the Gap, the podcast where we talk about businesses going global with the help of localization.
Stay put to meet the marketing, product, and software experts that make brands international.
And learn strategies to speak your customer's language. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Bridging the Gap. Today, we are going to stray away a little bit from the usual internationalization and business expansion topics, and we are going to dive into the language industry. But if you're from another industry, please stay put, because I think you're going to be very interested in what we're going to talk about. Particularly, the topic of today is large language models and artificial intelligence. And since the advent of the famous ChatGPT, we've been having multiple discussions about what this tool can do and if we're going to really need translators in the future. So maybe not all that glitters is gold. So today we have a few experts in the area which are going to be able to shed light on this interesting topic. The first one is Dorota Pawlak. She's a localization consultant, she's a translator, and she's a prompt engineer. Welcome, Dorota.
Hi, hello. Thank you for having me.
Today we also have someone here from the Localazy team. It's our project manager, Bílek. Hello, Jan.
Hello, hey.
And you've been dealing with this topic and multiple questions about AI, I presume. So it's going to be interesting to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Okay, so the first thing I wanted to ask you guys is just how has the language industry changed for you both in your respective roles since GPT came on? And has it really been a revolution as it's been advertised?
So I wouldn't say it's a revolution. I would be careful with that word. For me personally, I think it's more like an unavoidable innovation. So it's something that would come sooner or later. It definitely changed a lot. Maybe it shook the industry. Maybe it split the industry as well. There are many debates about AI, as you mentioned. Some people are against it. Some people are, pro. And I've noticed that some clients, indeed, they traded human translators for AI or AI plus human revision. But it doesn't mean there's no space for human translation. I'd say it's quite the contrary. And for me personally, I didn't notice any decrease in demand. Again, there was a slight transformation. So it's not only translation services that I offer, but also creative services like creating content and consulting. So I've noticed more demand for these areas. So there was more demand for, since ChatGPT and other large language models arrived, I've noticed more demand for content, such as creating online courses for my clients or writing blog articles for my clients, and also for consulting, both for translators and for companies that want to localize. So I'd say the AI changed my work in the way that I can see that there's more demand for creative tasks and more demand for tasks where your personal input and your experience is required, and that's something that AI can't offer.
Do you want to add something, Yang? What have you noticed in your daily work?
To me, when I'm talking to our customers, I see that the expectations change a bit. People are generally looking at AI as something that's magical and that will basically solve all their current problems. But it's not true. I would say that we're somewhere in the middle on a path towards general purpose AI that acts and basically behaves like a human. And between like the early stages where AI was just a input-output black box, where you put a bit of text and you will get an output as a translation. Hopefully these days are over because it's not that simple. But there's still a lot of learning. People need to understand how AI actually works and how to leverage to their advantage. And I still see some sort of tension between translators, machine translations. It's always been there. But with the rise of AI, I feel that the tension somehow amplified because people are afraid of their jobs. But I believe that we still have to get there. We need people to understand that AI is not here to take our jobs, but is here to help us actually do our jobs better. That's the biggest change, and there's still a challenge we need to overcome.
Before we dive into this debate, I wanted to ask you, Jan, specifically for the people who don't know, what is the difference between using ChatGPT and machine translation engines like Google Translate, DeepL? Is there like an important difference between the new large language models and what we knew up until then?
Yeah, so first, to clarify those terms, I can see that over the internet, people use all these terms interchangeably. They say AI and they mean OpenAI, or they mean ChatGPT, and it's a huge mess. So let me clarify that. AI is a discipline which has a purpose to create somehow in the future a general purpose AI, which would be a system or device that acts like a human. It can learn, you can interact with it, you can give it a different type of inputs, and it will respond, it will react as a human. And inside this discipline, which is called AI, you have different areas. One of this area is machine learning. It's just a way how people envision we could reach this state, which is general purpose AI. And then we have different, let's say, techniques like neural networks. We have deep learning, which is a specific type of neural networks. And then we have large language models, which are also based on neural networks and deep learning, but they are the latest advancement in the area. And large language models, it's not just OpenAI or GPT. GPT is a large language model, but we have many more. There are open source large language models, and all can be used right now. So different companies or even open source efforts are making advancement in this area. And the biggest revolution here is that right now, large language models model and somehow, let's say, I don't like the term understand, but they try to understand, they try to map the relationships between words in the sentence using advanced techniques like transformers and attention models. And this is really revolutionary because we can use this to somehow simulate those models, and we can simulate how people interact with the models in a really natural way, as you would speak to someone else.
This all sounds great on paper, but I'm very curious to know what Dorota has experienced in her translation and localization job. Dorota, what was your first impression when ChatGPT came about? Can you tell us a little bit about the first experiences you had with it and the promises you received from other people?
Yes, so I heard about it just after it was released, so quite quickly. I was a bit skeptical, especially that they used how people use it for trivial things, like asking questions about themselves, and obviously AI will fail. They don't know you, you're not a celebrity. So it was more about like making jokes, but then I started to dive deeper into it. So I took some courses on generative AI, on prompt engineering. I was also following other people who are trying to understand how to prompt ChatGPT or other large language models correctly. I tried to understand how it works and also find out how I can use it in my work, because that was obvious to me. This is the tool that may come in handy, not only in the translation process, but in many other daily processes, in other daily tasks, in marketing, in administration, basically any part of your business, even if it's only a freelance business. So I was quite amazed by what ChatGPT or other tools can do for me, for other translators, or for my clients. And I try to make sure I can use it to my advantage and to my clients' advantage, of course.
Can you tell us a little bit about what has been your experience so far with ChatGPT? And that this is the question, and it's a question for both of you. Can GPT really translate, or does it translate as opposed to as localized? Is there like a difference between like a literal translation, of course, and the localization process? And where does GPT feel into that process?
Yeah, it can translate, of course. We can take a sample text, ask ChatGPT to translate it into any language. You will see a result. In some cases, it will be a decent result. So the results are acceptable, especially for low risks translations. Low risks means if you use the text only for your internal purposes, or if it's user-generated content, like when you have, let's say, a booking app and you want to make sure that all the messages are translated live in different language so that all the users can understand the message, right? Or if you want to translate the reviews on your e-commerce website, it makes perfect job with that. If there's, for example, if you define the style guides and you give ChatGPT glossaries and precise context, and you define what you want to do with the text, in most cases, it will translate it quite accurately. But still, there are many limitations. So it's not creative, and in most cases, translation is a creative process. Still, ChatGPT will give you better results than Google Translate, for example. It will be more context relevant, but you need to make sure there's a human in that process to review the text. Very often ChatGPT or other large language models will fail to translate technical terms correctly, and very often it's not consistent. So if you have a long text with a lot of technical terms, sometimes it will get these terms correctly, and then suddenly it will just forget what's the precise terminology, and it will translate it in another way. Also, translation and also localization is about being culturally aware. So very often you have to adapt the message to another market or to your target group. And then ChatGPT will fail to do that without specific instructions. There are many subtle nuances. So it's all about creativity, cultural sensitivity, highly specific text. These are the domains where ChatGPT can't really translate as perfectly as a human could.
Yeah, I really agree with what Dorota said, but I believe there are like multiple levels. I think that when people talk about the translation quality of these models, they forget one important aspect, and that is how has the model been trained on your context, your industry, or your existing translations. Because often when people make claims that the GPT translations are not good, or they are completely off, they don't provide the context. They try it on the default version, which is available on the website, which is like a general purpose. You don't have any sort of context specific training. Even if you provide your own context, it still is not the same as if you would fine tune the model on the industry and on your first level is the raw GPT or raw machine translation model. It's basically the same for machine translations, LLMs, whatever model you use. The first level is always the raw default form you could use, and it's not optimal. It could give you like misleading results. Next level will be a fine-tuned model, where you would use some data from your specific industry and you will fine-tune that model to work better in that specific area. You could get much better results for that. And then the third level will be if you provide all your context you have. And that's where I see really huge opportunity in language models, is that you could provide it all context, all previous translations, and it's really easy to do. And you could like increase the translation quality 10 times. So when we talk about translation quality, we have to always say what type of model are we using, because was it a raw model you access from the internet? Was it trained on some specific industry, or was it feed it with all the context it needed? And then all what Dorota says to me applies. It's not perfect. It never will be perfect. It's not even supposed to be.
Mhm.
The translation is not that simple. It's not like input output. It's more like a process conversation with the other person. Can you imagine a situation where you want someone another person to translate something for you? They don't get it right the first time. They try different versions, and that's how we should approach machine translations in general.
Yeah, I'm totally on it. I absolutely agree. Context is everything. Like in translation, the same for ChatGPT or other large language models. If you don't have the context, if you don't provide the context, then the result will be very poor, very poor.
So do you think many people in the business don't really know that they can't use GPT out of the box? They have to train it somehow, right? So what kind of information can you feed GPT and how?
You can provide any and all information, anything you want to provide. But I'd say for translation purposes, it's very important to provide the context. So say who is the target audience? What is the text about? Define the role. So the famous act as. So act as, I know, Spanish, German translators specialized in engineering, right? So define the output. So what kind of format the translated text should have. Include templates, include examples, maybe include some previously translated texts, style guides, glossaries. Super important to be very clear and specific in your prompt. Well, make sure it works. So once you provide a very long prompt, when you fine tune it with style guides, glossaries, previous translations, make sure it works as you want it to work. So provide some sample input, make sure the output is up to your standards. So you can tweak the prompt and keep fine-tuning your model until you are satisfied with the results.
So is there a way to learn to design better prompts, which might be the problem for the translation quality? You need to fit it with all these materials you've talked about. Is there a way to learn how to design them? Is it like a very difficult process? You know a lot about prompt. I don't know if it's been very recent for you. How did you get into that? And how can you help anyone who doesn't really know how to prompt GPT?
Well, I would say it's quite important to analyze sample prompts. So nowadays online, you will find a lot of resources. It doesn't have to be an online course or a certificate in prompt engineering. You can simply check online for examples of prompts, maybe for prompts specifically designed for the translation industry. You can also go to the GPTs, to the custom GPTs section in ChatGPT, and there's a way that you can look behind the scenes, so you can check the prompt that was used to create that GPT. So maybe it will give you some idea how to write short and precise prompts. I would also, I think it's very important to remember not to make your prompt too long, because ChatGPT has only about 4,000 tokens. It's roughly about 1,000 words if you use English. So you can't provide too much information in your prompt because these 4,000 tokens are both for your input and your output. So you have to be very short and specific, and try to avoid biases in your prompt, because when your prompt is biased, the result will be biased as well. So I'd say it's not difficult to learn as a translator, to learn prompt engineering, because it's like translating, let's say, normal language to the machine language. So it's a kind of act of playing with words. You just have to learn how to talk to the machine.
I wanted to ask you both. We know that GPT can do many things if we use it correctly, but there is still some biases and limitations that we are going to come across. Can you just describe a few of the ones you've encountered and how they can just be a bias during the process of good localization?
To me, there are many limitations, and we have to approach these models with care because there are certain patterns in society that are actually mapped into these models, and they are amplified by them. It's these typical examples of gender biases where translators usually try to express themselves in a gender neutral way. However, models like GPT are really vulnerable to this, and they're somehow even hard to convince to do otherwise, because it's so deep in the learning data, the training data. It's really hard to make them unlearn it. But if, as Dorota said, if you use correct prompt, it's easier to fix. So the first thing will be the biases, not just gender biases, but general biases which exist in society. It could be stereotypes, things like that could be potentially harmful in your communication. I can see another limitation, that is the human expertise, the context, like translating things that are not literal. Sometimes in certain countries or cultures, there are specific things that can be only understood by humans. It can be jokes, it can be idioms, and it's impossible to translate them. However, if you enter this into some model, they will try to translate it, and it's not right, because you're not supposed to translate them. You're not supposed to translate these things. You are supposed to find alternatives which would convey the same meaning. So these are just two examples. Maybe Dorota can complete me. But I have another, which is more of a technical limitation, and that is compared to traditional MTs, machine translation engines, GPTs can be expensive. And if you have large amounts of text, this can cost you a lot.
I agree with what Jan said. So especially biases, culturally sensitive texts, and texts where creativity is required are simply limitations for ChatGPT. And as very often when we translate text, there are many words that don't have direct equivalent in another language. ChatGPT will just replace, let's say, very specific word with more general word. But we need here a human judgment. So as a translator, you need to decide, can I really use that more general term without losing the cultural connotations? For example, there's the word powwow, right? It's like from the Native American culture. It means like a gathering in the Native American culture when there's a lot of singing, dancing, there's a lot of cultural heritage going on. In most languages, it doesn't have a direct equivalent. But this word is used also in business settings. So when you have a sentence with the word powwow, and as a translator, you need to decide, okay, can I simply translate it as a meeting? Is it okay to make it more general? Or do I have to make some reference to that cultural theme, that cultural heritage? ChatGPT can't make this judgment for us. It will just shoot and choose something randomly. In most cases, it will use a more general term. But as a translator, I can add, for example, a footnote and explain what that term means if there is no direct equivalent, or I can put extra information in brackets if I think it's relevant for my target audience. So ChatGPT fails in cases when we need the human judgment and when we need to decide what's relevant for the target audience and what's not.
Mm-hmm. There's also another limitation that we've been witnessing in the language industry, which is the quality of the data set regarding certain languages. So there's lots of information about English, French, Spanish. But for example, Dorota, you deal with Polish, and is there a difference in the quality of what GPT can provide when the resources on that language are more limited?
Well, Polish is definitely more, there are definitely fewer resources than for English, but still, I would say if you provide enough context and templates and examples, ChatGPT does quite a good job. But there are other limitations, especially with gender neutrality. So in Polish, we have genders, we have inflections, and ChatGPT fails here, even if you provide it with instructions and examples. Sometimes it gets it correctly, sometimes not. But you can see the difference. I'd say in English it's more fluent, it can easily find more synonyms, it can play with the tone, with the style, and for Polish, not necessarily. So you can do easy things with ChatGPT for languages such as Polish or Czech or Slovakian or Slovenian, but the machine will fail you if you want to, for example, play with the tones, with gender neutrality. If you want to do something more creative, there's fewer resources, fewer training materials. So the results are not as good as for English.
And I imagine the situation is even worse for minority languages, or, for example, different African languages. I don't know, Jan, if you have some insight into this, the data that is available in different languages.
Just wanted to point out that I have a similar experience with Czech, which is the same language group as Polish, and I know both languages. And I would say that Czech resources on the internet are even more scarce than Polish. There's less people, there's less material. So I have the experience that it's not doing a really good job in Czech, especially those, as Dorota mentioned, those small nuances in gender, tone. In Czech language, we're very sensitive on let's say, these small unspoken meanings that go like between the lines, and it just sounds weird. That's what it is. Even if it's like grammatically 100% correct, it's you can feel that something's not right there. Yeah, but regarding the data set, I heard that I read it online. I could find the article later, and we could add it to the description. That actually the language model for English, I'm talking about ChatGPT right now, was fine-tuned by humans, and they needed some sort of cheap workforce to fine-tune that model. And where can you find this cheap workforce? In Africa. And in Africa, they speak very specific, let's say, they use a specific choice of words.
Yeah.
So countries like Nigeria, they are native in English, but it's not the same English as you would normally hear in the UK or in the US. And these people were supposed to train these models to correct the outputs they were getting. And they might have introduced some biases towards certain words that sound weird and in normal English.
So is there a way to actually train a large language model regarding dialects, for example? I guess it is, but there's also the economic problem and the human problem, right? You need time, you need resources, and you need expert translators and localizers to do so. So, for example, if I now take a translation from Spanish from Spain to Mexican Spanish, maybe GPT doesn't even know how to adapt the vocabulary and the expressions that are typical there, unless I provide it with the human expertise, right?
It's not a simple answer, like sometimes it gets it right. It depends on the prompt, but there are cases where it just doesn't work, and that's what we've already mentioned, like things like idioms, some jokes, or culture-specific things that can be really hard to translate. Yeah, I think the biggest issue here is that we're still sort of treating the machine translation as an input-output. Like you put there some text and you get some other text out of it. But that's not how translation works.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And that's the biggest misconception we have to unlearn as translators, as an industry.
So what is the role that translators and localizers are going to be playing in the future here? What do you think it's going to happen in the following years regarding this mix of AI and human output, human input?
Well, I think translators will have two choices: either become super creative, so specialize in creative content, maybe become copywriter, or maybe do transcreation, maybe specialize in marketing content, or become a very highly specialized translator, say medical translator, technical translation. So because these are areas where AI fails usually, and at the same time, it's a big opportunity for translators. Also, translators will be probably acting more like a language experts, maybe even to review the AI generated text, maybe to help to fine tune it, maybe to help to advise their customers on how to adapt text or other materials to another culture. So we might take a role of a cultural consultant or cultural expert. And well, maybe in many cases, translators will be perceived as AI reviewers. They may agree with it or not. They may agree to do it or not. But I think the biggest opportunity here is to become a very creative translator or a highly technical translator.
Jan, in the case of the localization industry, what opportunities do you see for service providers?
If we talk about the future, but yeah, as you say, the future is now. So there's a lot of opportunities regarding the fine-tuning the models. So far, it has been really hard for companies to train their own models, give them their data, their existing translations. It's possible, but currently it's really costly. And I believe that in the future, everyone will be able to actually provide context and fine-tune their own models on the context of the whole company. And that will really speed up things for translators, for content creators. Yeah, I see as a huge opportunity in the industry to actually be able to spin up your own large language model that is trained on your data inside your company and not interact with it like, as I said, input output, but actually have a conversation, ask for help on this specific, let's say, piece of text, and get a feedback on it. And then as a translator, you could use your own judgment to update the text regarding what was the output of the model. That's what the opportunity I see, and I think we should move this direction, not to actually release the tension between AI, machine translation, and translators that don't want to behave like AI reviewers.
Anything to add, Dorota? We're nearing the end here.
Well, I think in the future, well, translators or other professionals will simply have no choice but to use AI as their assistants. So it will not be our opponent, but more like a component of our work. So that's the way it will work.
Well, Dorota, Jan, it's been a pleasure hearing your insights on AI. Keep in touch. Stick around for the next episodes because this topic will arise again, I'm sure. And thank you for being here with us. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
See you in the next episode. Bye.
See you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
If you like this episode, please follow our channel and add it to your favorites so you don't miss the next conversation. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube for updates and bonus content. Until next time, stay curious!